What's going on, everyone? So Legends of the Force is just about to release as of recording this video, and that means we're going to talk about some of the best uncommons you've got to try. These are some great budget options. Obviously, legendaries and rares, yes, there's going to be some great ones, but some of these uncommons are even better than some of the legendaries and rares, and in some cases absolutely better than some of the legendaries and rares, and therefore you can really make a solid deck building around some of these. So definitely want to take a look out for these. And of course, there are some of the uncommons from previous sets that have absolutely dominated the meta. And honestly, Legends of the Force has some pretty good ones that are probably going to do the same. Before we get started on the first card of the video, big thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. Guys, I have a TCG player link in the description down below if you want to pick up any of the cards we're going to talk about today. And let's dive into it. Starting us off, we've got Chirrut, a 4-cost ground unit in Vigilance, 3/5 Force with Sentinel. And he has this effect of when this unit is attacked, you can use the Force. If you do, the attacker gets -2/-0 for this attack. So first off, we have a 4-resource 3/5 Sentinel, which is okay. It's not horrible. It's not insane. It is actually a reasonable card. Again, nothing super exciting about it. Baseline. It's a little bit better than some of the other ones that we have had seen in the past because it had the Force trait. Okay, what does this card actually do when you have the Force, though? Well, first off, after we got the full set reveal, it was actually really pretty easy to generate the Force, and you could oftentimes generate the Force multiple times in a turn is when Chirrut really gets scary. And if you think about this card, this is almost like putting a Boba Fett's armor on one of your units when you have the Force back in the olden days when Boba Fett wasn't banned. It was extremely difficult to kill Boba Fett when Boba Fett's armor was down on him, and Chirrut isn't really all that different, although, you know, less toughness, less damage. Yeah, okay, a lot different. But the effect remains very similar. Reducing your opponent's attacking power by 2 allows this guy to soak up potentially multiple hits and really disrupt your opponent's game plan. And if you ever get an upgrade on him, it becomes extremely difficult to do anything. I've had a lot of times where I've seen people put like Entrenched on Chirrut. I've had people put Electro Staff, which gives -3/-0 on attacks. I've seen people just put like Bolstered Endurance on it, Chirrut. It is just really obnoxious to get through this guy. And that's pretty much it. The fact that the rest of the set really supports you gaining the Force is what makes him so obnoxious. Next up, we've got Darth Tyranus. And I know, before everyone starts to go to the comment section to roast me, I know it's not an uncommon. It is technically a special rarity card, similar to the starter deck cards from previous, but I figured it fit the theme today because these uncommons are pretty budget friendly, and the special deck cards are also pretty budget friendly. I think Darth Tyranus, even before this set actually releases, sitting at like 80 cents, and it's a good card. 4-cost ground unit in Villainy. It's a 4/3 with shielded, and it's got the Force separated Sith tags. While the Force is with you, this unit gains ambush. So this one's actually quite interesting and stronger for more reasons than you might initially think. Typically, when we have a Force payoff card, you actually have to consume the Force token in order for you to get that payoff. Darth Tyranus actually doesn't have you do that. So you can still use the Force token for whatever you might do, whether it's like a Darth Maul action or a Chirrut trigger or whatever it is, or like a Karis death trigger. You could still use the Force for those purposes. And you could still get the ambush from Darth Tyranus on the same turn, even without the fact that maybe you have a Virgin's Temple where you can only generate the Force pretty much once a turn. Darth Tyranus allows you to do it all. The shielded aspect, the ambush aspect is absolutely amazing. A 4-resource 4/3 shielded ambusher means that you could kill something and oftentimes stay alive as a 4/3. And even in some cases, you can attack into like 2 powered units, kill their unit, and then be left with a 4/1 shielded, which is exceptional of a card. And it's also a Force unit in of itself. So let's say you do have the Force and you're playing the Force base in that the one that allows you to create the Force when a Force unit attacks. If you are playing Darth Tyranus here, let's say you were to even consume the Force, well, it actually does have ambush, so it would actually generate you the Force token back, which is pretty nice. And in some cases, attacking with a Force unit is relevant for specific cards. So this card has just been absolutely exceptional. Next up, we're going to talk about a very straightforward card, and that is Shatterpoint. This is actually a Force event, which isn't actually all that relevant, but figured I'd mention it. In Vigilance, it is choose 1, defeat a non-leader unit with 3 or less HP, or use the Force, defeat a non-leader unit. This is pretty much better Vanquish for the Force-based decks, and has been an absolute staple in the Legends of the Force meta if you are playing a Force deck, because you get a 1 cheaper Vanquish. And in the fail case, which is defeat 3 or less remaining HP unit, isn't actually all that much of a fail case in some situations, because there's a lot of times when I just play Shatterpoint in the first mode and then use my Force token for something else. But if I really need Shatterpoint to do what I need it to do, which is kill big heavy hitters, I can oftentimes do that in my Force-based deck. This one's really not that complicated. It is just, if I'm playing a Force deck, I can now basically have that Force give me a 1 resource cost reduction on a Vanquish, which is awesome. And in the case I don't have the Force token, at least I have a fail case scenario of being able to use it with 3 or less remaining HP units. Next up, we have Asajj. Now, this one's interesting because the power level on this is really hard, but I haven't really been able to find a shell for it that is like already incredible, with the exception of Quinlan. So we got 5 resource ground units in aggression, 5/6 Force bounty hunter. When played and on attack, you can give another friendly Force unit +2/+0 for this phase. So obviously, just baseline, if you're playing Force units, you have a nice when played effect to essentially play out a unit and make a threat even bigger on the board, which is awesome. As I said earlier, Quinlan has been a great place for Asajj. Still not as good as Plo Koon in that deck, because Plo Koon is just absurd, but still a great addition that can give you kind of just a bunch of extra power when it comes down to one of your other units. There are some decks that I've used ECL with Asajj, like a Force-based ECL. The only tricky part about that is a lot of the Force units also want you to be playing a Force base, which means ECL is probably not going to be the play. But regardless, just playing this is a 5/6 and giving some pump over to your Force units has just been really solid. And I think this is one of those cards, definitely if we get more and more Force units, it can get more and more powerful. All right, everyone, you knew this was coming. It's Kelleran Beq. Come on, guys. We knew this was going to be on the list. It is 7 resource ground unit, command heroism, 7/7 Force Jedi Republic. When played, you search the top 7 cards of your deck for a unit, reveal it, and play it. It costs 3 less. This is good for so many reasons. 7 resource, 7/7 is already pretty good. It has the Force tag, which is relevant, even has the Jedi tag, which is relevant. But then you get this exceptional effect that is actually, in my opinion, stronger than Vader. And you could even argue that Kelleran Beq as a whole is stronger than the 7-cost Villainy Vader, although I don't necessarily think that is true. But Kelleran Beq's late game potential is certainly higher than something like Darth Vader in most cases, because you search the top 7 cards of your deck for any unit and you could play it. It doesn't have to cost 3 or less, as long as you have the resources to pay for that cost -3. As an example, there are many games where I've played Kelleran Beq and then played like a Luke Skywalker off of my Kelleran Beq for a total of 11 resources. That is absolutely a possibility. Absolutely exceptional. The only downside you could say, if you're going to compare it to the Villainy Vader, is the fact that it doesn't have ambush, so it doesn't necessarily immediately impact the board in terms of getting some sort of damage on your opponent's units. But just the fact that it comes down, builds a board on its own, is just so much better. It is so much better than something like U-Wing Reinforcements, which is played all over the place, by the way. You still pay 7, you get a 7/7 body, and you will get a second unit almost every single time. It is disgustingly good. Next up is very unassuming, and that is Gungi. Probably the easiest we'll have to talk about in this entire video. 2-cost ground unit, command heroism, 2/5 Force Jedi Wookiee. It has nothing else but a 2/5 stat line with the Force and Jedi tags. That is good enough. A 2/5 body is so much better than a 2/4 for so many reasons. Take, for example, a Cad Bane or a Quinlan deck. If you start with the initiative and you play Gungi and they were to use their, play a unit, or in both cases, actually just play a unit and deal 1 damage to Gungi and try to use Tarkin Town, your Gungi lives. It is super difficult to take out a 5 toughness unit early on in the game without something like a Power of the Dark Side. And that means that you can set up your next turn. And that is so crucial for the Force decks, because a lot of Force decks are playing things like Force Throw, which require Force units, or are playing a Force base, one of the common Force bases that forces you to attack with a Force unit for you to get the Force token. That was a lot of time saying Force, by the way. It even works super well with General's Blade. As I said, very unlikely to die, and therefore you could put a General's Blade on it, get the value from the Jedi tag. It is just such an amazing setup card. It is obnoxious to deal with, and it really makes things like a 2/3, which a lot of other decks were playing in previous sets, just feel horrible because you're playing 2 less toughness, which means that you can't even trade with 2 attacks into a 2/5 that is Gungi. It is an exceptional one, albeit unassuming. Next up is Karis, for a little bit of the reasons that Gungi is, but also for a little bit of reasons that he's not. We have 2-cost ground unit, vigilance, villainy, 2/4 force knight unit. When defeated, may use the force. If you do, give unit -2/-2 for this phase. So clearly this is, okay, I am playing a force synergy deck. So you have a 2-resource, 2/4 force unit. The 4th toughness is very important. Similar to Gungi, it's just really tough to deal with 4 and 5 toughness units. 4 toughness, well, a little bit more easy than 5 toughness unit, but still pretty good. It also synergizes with things like Virgin's Temple, which is relevant in some decks. But more importantly, it is a force unit on turn 1 that is not necessarily easy to kill. And in Karis's case, you have the force setup and payoff in kind of one card. The fact that you can give something -2/-2 gets through things like Crafty Smugglers, Krennics, Secretive Sages. It hits space units if they have 2 toughness. It actually could trade with 4 toughness units because you can go ahead and attack them, have this be defeated, and actually go ahead and give that -2/-2. Lots of versatility with Karis. Very good setup and a very decent payoff for just being a 2-resource card. It is not like you have to do a lot to make a 2-resource card excellent, and well, Karis is doing just that. Probably one of the most interesting cards on this list is Adi Mundi, and not necessarily because his effects is insane, but because of how the game has shifted. We got a 4-cost ground unit in aggression, heroism, 4/4 force Jedi Republic. When played, you may use the force. If you do, draw 2 cards. First off, love the art. Love that Clone Wars arc, by the way. Super, super amazing series of episodes on the Geonosis battlegrounds. But 4-cost ground unit 4/4 is already okay. It's not insane. It's an okay stat line. You're really looking for a 4/5. But what do you get? You get the Force tag. Okay, that's pretty important. You get the Jedi tag. Okay, that's pretty important as well. Then you also get this effect of being able to draw 2 cards if you have the Force, which obviously in a lot of decks you will. I talked about this earlier, but there's a lot of cards like Gungi, for example, that allow you to set up the Force generation, the common Force bases, or even Virgin's Temple to basically guarantee you the Force when you play Adi Mundi. And the drawing 2 cards effect is usually not a strong thing in Star Wars Limited, unless it comes with some sort of powerful other thing attached to it. And guess what? Adi Mundi, you get a 4/4 body as well as drawing the 2 cards. If you look at past cards, something like Mission Briefing, I believe is the card. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Mission Briefing is 3 resources for draw 2 cards. And that's it. Like, that's where we were at back in set 1. Now we're playing a 4-resource 4/4 that draws us 2 cards, which is incredible. And the extra effect of drawing 2 cards, while not actually hindering a lot of your other deck, it just curves out quite nicely, as well as providing that extra force synergy. Again, paying like 3 or 4 resources to draw a couple of cards would be so much worse if a lot of the cards synergize with force cards, and guess what? You did not play a force unit because you played the card that drew you cards instead of things like Adi Mundi, which does both. Well, drawing 2 cards in a mid-range meta where you're trying to play value cards and trying to get to the late game is just that much better, especially when you play things like Han 2 or Han 1, which can push out cards faster or use their cards as resources to get a little bit of advantage. Next up, and our last one from the special rarity slot, we've got Obi-Wan Kenobi. This one's a 3-cost ground unit in command heroism, 3/5 force Jedi Republic. When you play a force unit, including Obi-Wan, it gains Sentinel. This one has been way better than expected. This has just done so much work. And honestly, I suppose it's not as surprising as I would have initially thought, but the fact that it's a 3/5 ground unit, which is reasonable stats, perfectly average for a 3-cost unit, that has relevant tags in both the Force and Jedi, and I guess Republic tag, but that's usually not that relevant. The Force and Jedi certainly are. That also gives you Sentinel on that turn to protect your turn 1 play, or just to stall out some damage, is exceptional. If you look back at some previous sets, take Twilight of the Republic, a lot of people were trying to play out Captain Typho, which is a 3-cost ground unit, 2/4, which does something similar, which when played and on attack, you can give a unit Sentinel. Well, this one comes with an extra toughness and an extra power, and gives you Sentinel when it comes down, which is the most important part. And it can continuously be an obnoxious card by giving itself Sentinel whenever you play future Force cards, which if you're playing Obi-Wan, there's a good chance that you are already playing a Force-based deck. So 3-resource, 3/5 Sentinel, even though the Tyrannus comes down, is pretty good. And you can even compare this to something like a Magna Guard, which was a card that people were playing a lot of in the earlier sets as well. The 3 resource 3/4 that when played you get Sentinel, that one was actually pretty good as well. This one again just has an extra point of toughness and doesn't even necessarily lose its Sentinel because you're playing consistent force units. Take for example our command aggression deck that we're even building right now in this top 10 list. Something like turn 1 Gungi, turn 2 Obi-Wan Kenobi, turn 3 Adi Mundi. That's an incredible curve. You've now put up a little bit of blocker, you've put some high toughness units down, probably able to trade off some units, and then you've refilled your hand with Adi Mundi with also placing other body that's also going to trigger the Sentinel. Super solid card. And next up and lastly, we've got Mace Windu, 6 cost ground unit in aggression heroism, 6/6 Force Jedi Republic with the overwhelm keyword, as well as when played you may use the force if you do deal 4 damage to a unit. This one has been quite excellent. There's a couple things that I really like about Mace Windu. Obviously 6 resource 6/6 is totally reasonable. You get overwhelm, which is quite nice as well, and then you get this powerful effect of dealing 4 damage. Now the most common comparison that I would make is a Wrecker. Now Wrecker is a 6 resource 7/6 with overwhelm, has different tags, usually not relevant, that says when play you may defeat a friendly unit resource to deal 5 damage to a ground unit. So if you compare 1 by 1, which Wrecker was a very commonly played card, okay, you get 1 less point of power with Mace Windu, but you get relevant tags in Force and Jedi. Okay, you get 1 less damage from Mace Windu, and you do have to use the Force, you have to play it in a Force deck, but most importantly, you don't actually have to defeat a resource, and this thing can hit ground and space units. This fits so much better in the mid to late game decks that are looking to play bigger and splashier units. Wrecker was always like, okay, it's good, but unfortunately I go down a resource, which means it takes longer for me to get to the big units like Home One or Crate Dragon. And Mace Windu does not do that at all. Instead, it just comes down, defeats a unit for you, and leaves behind a pretty solid 6/6 body. So very much so on theme for those mid-range decks, more so than Wrecker. Wrecker was much more of an aggressively focused deck, which still Wrecker is very good and one of the cards you have to worry about, but only for the more aggressive decks that can actually deploy Wrecker and get immediately end the game effects with it, like ECL, whereas Mace Windu can be played as a value unit because you're not defeating your own resources. But that's going to be the top 10 uncommons for me, guys. Let me know what your top 10 are and whether or not I missed any of the uncommons that you find very strong, and I'll see you all for the next one.